The Department of Defense announced $13.4 million in Title III investments as part of the national response to COVID-19 and to support small domestic unmanned aerial systems. So this was done through the CARES Act. Many businesses of different sizes, I'm sure, are aware of some of the stimulus that has been coming out of Congress. The awards were made to 5 US-based companies: AirMap, ModalAI, Skydio, Graffiti Enterprises, and Obsidian Sensors. The 5 companies represent a variety in the drone industry, from unmanned traffic management, UTM, hardware, software, and sensors. So, Marion, I'd love to start with you on this. Can you maybe just take us a little bit step further? I mean, there's much more that you wrote about in this article, and we'll put the link in the description. But question for you and for the group. I mean, what do we think kind of about this investment, and what do we think about the 5 companies chosen?
I think it's absolutely fascinating, and I'll tell you why. I think that this is a real indication that the U.S. government has decided that drones are critical, that drones represent critical production. So if you think about all the other things that they've chosen to invest in to protect domestic production. So the idea here is not necessarily that, poor Skydio or poor AirMap, we have to give them money. That's not it.
Right.
It's really that we have to support these domestic industries and make sure that they succeed so that we maintain that domestic production capability. And they've done that with things like shipbuilding. They've done it with things like the factories that create the fabric for U.S. military uniforms. Anytime they have a production or a manufacturing capacity that they believe is critical to keep going in the U.S. And so I think it's incredibly interesting that they decided that drone technology was one of those things that is critical to our success, that we need to keep that production capacity available and expanding here in the U.S.
Any thoughts on the names, Patrick? The companies that are up there?
Well, to tell you the truth, I'm only familiar with a few of them, probably the ones that are universally known in the industry, like AirMap and Skydio. And speaking to it overall, I would say that I think it's a good thing, like Miriam said, although I sadly don't share her optimism. I think she's right. I think this signals, that the U.S. as a matter of national policy is beginning to take the question of drones seriously. However, I am dubious of the ability of the federal government in particular to sort of see through industrial policy to its natural conclusion. And the reasons for that I would point to are things like our space program, which has literally been stuck in orbit for 50 years since the Apollo mission, and also the decades-long efforts for the FAA to upgrade to the next-gen air traffic control system. The problem is, to really make industrial policy work takes certainly not a one-off, and not even a 2-year initiative or something. It has to go on for a decade or more. And this is no knock against any party or any politician, because it's gone both ways on either side. But a new administration comes in and they want to do it their way, and they want to go to Mars instead of the moon or whatever. And so, the previous 4 years of investment largely gets scrapped, and then it starts over. And with next gen funding for the FAA, one administration thinks it's great, pours money into it. They lay out, software contracts to develop it. The next administration rips that money away. And, and so they're stuck. And then the third administration wants to know why they haven't made any progress on next gen. So I think that I think this is a great development. I certainly hope it's the beginning of sort of a concerted industrial policy surrounding drones, which I think we urgently need in this country. I just don't have confidence that will be the outcome. And again, this is, administrations on both sides of the aisle going back decades have demonstrated this sort of short-sightedness. So maybe this will be the time it changes.
Well, I think I'll split the difference, and this has kind of been an evolving conversation on this podcast that really kicked off when we had Vic Moss and Brian Garrett Glazer on. So the first thing I'll start out is the amount seems low. I wish that there was more money. I always want more money for drones, specifically on the commercial side. And I really do want to see, there's a lot of kind of little mini projects on the DoD side that are investing in drones, dipping their toe in the water, researching drones. It's nice to see an extra step in commitment, but I want to see more commitment. But to Patrick's point about the kind of, talking about the government in its ability to actually succeed on projects and understanding the limitation of that actually turnover, right? As the factor that kind of slows things down. If we're really going to invest in drones, it's got to be a real investment to make sure we get over that hill of interest where essentially it's almost like the guilt of the new administration come in saying, wait, we spent $100 million on this. We spent $2 trillion on this. Well, I guess we need to spend $1 trillion more just to make sure it actually gets done. So hopefully this is actually just the beginning of a commitment to get things on this road actually moving. I think they chose great companies. If anybody saw what Skydio put out this week, I think they kept a lot of that progress quiet. It was a nice drop to see from them because it answered a lot of the doubts that I was having about what their potential was post Skydio 2, right? So it seems like they're moving, seems like they're getting investment. And it's interesting to note that their investment individually as a company, that they were able to raise 100 million compared to this. So almost tenfold in the private sector. So, I don't care where the money comes from. I think it's nice to have the U.S. government thumbs up, and that even in times like this, we're still getting investment into the drone industry from private equity.
And I would say too, Patrick, I totally agree with you. Like I'm not totally optimistic about government programs, unfortunately. Again, and no blame, everybody's blamed, I guess, not one party over the other. But I do have a lot of faith in the drone industry. I have faith in those companies to be able to take that money and run with it. Skydio getting $4 million from the U.S. government is maybe not as significant as the almost $5 million in contracts that they've gotten from the U.S. government, to produce those drones. And then the $100 million of funding to help them expand their company and their production capabilities. So while I wouldn't rely necessarily solely on one government program to make them work, I think those companies are going to take it and run with it. That I'm optimistic about.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And by the way, I've got to throw a little brag in here. As a journalist, I'm sure Miriam will understand this impulse. In an issue of Rotodrone magazine last year, I predicted after Exponential that Skydio had a larger public safety type aircraft they were working on quietly in the background with thermal imaging capabilities and a few other things. And lo and behold, yesterday they announced it. So score one for me as an industry analyst. The best part is that
tips too.
$5
Yeah.
off at Starbucks.
For anybody that wants to take it, just for people that are listening and maybe didn't see the Skydio announcement, does anyone want to just catch everyone up to speed on what happened?
I can do that if you want, because I just did an interview with Adam Bry yesterday. It was so fun. So Skydio introduced their X2 series, one of which is designed for the military. It's a SSR drone, and the other one, which is really designed for enterprise. And they just had some, again, it's thermal camera equipped, as Patrick mentioned, perfect for public safety, also like enterprise inspections, just some amazing software and sensor capabilities. New in addition to Skydio's sort of autonomy. So this is really a great thing for them. It's kind of significant because what Skydio is most good at is, flying a manual drone can be tricky. And so they've sort of tried to eliminate that trickiness. But when you're talking about the enterprise, you need your workmen to just be able to have a drone in their tool bag. You don't want to necessarily have to schedule separate drone pilots to do all those jobs. You want your existing workforce to be able to do those jobs. Skydio's autonomy does make that a lot easier.